이 시리즈는 우리 교포 친구들이 그들이 바라본 한국의 이야기를 들려줍니다.
Hi, I'm Jungmin. I was born in Korea. Then I lived in New Zealand for most of my life. And now I'm Deputy Head of Mission at the New Zealand Embassy in Seoul, Korea.
Should we start this with the All Blacks kind of rugby intro dance thing?
The haka.
I'm joking.
I was about to get. Well, you made me. Put my shirt on. I'll take it off and do the haka. No.
Do you know it? Do you know how to do it?
There's mini hakas.
Mini hakas.
So the world will mostly know kamate, which is the All Blacks one, the one they do. But every for an army unit will have their own haka. Each school will have their own haka.
Wow.
Yeah, and we perform it at sports, events just like anyone. So.
Wow. There's so many questions I want to ask you. There's so many tangents I want to go on. But can you tell me a bit about who you are, what you do, and I guess why you're in Korea at the moment?
My name's Jong Park. I'm the Deputy Head of Mission at the New Zealand Embassy here in Seoul. So we're here essentially representing New Zealand's interests in Korea. My family was one of the first families to move over to New Zealand from Korea. It was like late 70s, early 80s. So, but I've always had my eye on coming back to Korea. It almost feels like a homecoming.
Well, I guess from that point, two questions I kind of want to ask is, what was your experience of growing up in New Zealand? You say you kind of, I'm a New Zealander, and you feel that?
Well, probably given my age, it's a bit hazy, the early years, but I can imagine I came, so before even starting preschool or kindergarten, I came living with my family, wouldn't have spoken the language at all, English, but I can't ever have a vivid memory of not being able to communicate with people. Right. So, I just think that shows how young children are like sponges, right? You immerse them in. But also, at that time, immigration from Asia in general was not common. Chinese people had a bit of a history there. So I guess to Kiwis who had seen Chinese people for a long time, I looked similar. But when you explain where Korea was, I think a lot of people didn't know where Korea was. So it was Korea, even with the Korean War and the New Zealand links to that. I grew up in the capital, Wellington, and it was just a really nice, good size. It's not a huge city. New Zealand's not a huge place. But the people were welcoming, the Māori obviously is a big part. And I grew up in an area that was quite heavy with Māori and Polynesian families. And I think there was a kindred spirits there as well, kind of Māori obviously being the indigenous people of New Zealand. But I think the kind of concepts of family, community are all quite are very similar to how the Koreans view it.
Interesting.
Yeah, so like growing up in the street, you'd become friendly with your neighbours, you'll be playing backyard football, cricket or rugby or touch rugby with the kids, and it didn't really factor the fact that you look different. Right. And I wouldn't say it was idyllic. You did encounter pockets of kind of racism or discrimination, but in general terms, it was a really happy childhood.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Even when you were living in New Zealand, would you come and visit Korea quite often, or?
It was a long time between drinks, so family and I immigrated when I was 3. I didn't come back for my first trip to Korea until I was 19. So when I came back at 19, it was after so I did my first year of university, at 18, and then worked hard, got a part-time job, saved up money for a plane ticket, and was like, I'm going to go reconnect with Korea, and
You were on your own?
On my own, yeah, and
wow.
I do remember landing, I think it was Gimpo Airport at the time, it wasn't even Incheon then, and it was culture shock.
Really?
Yeah, the culture shock was seeing so many people that looked like me. It blew my mind because I'd come from a place where I was a minority, the way I looked, and just seeing hundreds of me, I was like, oh my gosh, landing at the airport was blew my mind. And then just how crowded things were. New Zealand's country of 5 million, so half of Seoul's population, but almost 3 times the landmass. So, you can go wide open spaces in New Zealand. You can go to places where you won't see a soul for over an hour. But in Korea, everywhere you turn, there's just crowds of people, and they're much more comfortable being crowded. So your personal space and personal bubble, you quickly lose that. You got to lose that in Korea, else you won't be happy. And of course, everyone, family were really happy to see me. Obviously, I hadn't seen family and relatives in, what was that, 16, 17 years. So just that kind of sense of, this is my blood, this is my whānau, what we say in Māori, my family, is just really, really heartwarming. And of course, as with any friends and family, they want to show you the best of Korea. So that first trip, I'll never forget.
How long have you been in Korea for now? Living?
So for this stint, I've been almost 18 months.
18 months?
Yeah.
And how
18 months.
How long will that?
It's a 4-year posting,
4 year.
so less than halfway through.
What's that relationship been like in terms of identity, being in Korea? Do you feel more Korean being here, or do you feel more, I'm from New Zealand?
That's a good question. Look, I mean, I speak fluent Korean, but if I speak Korean to someone, immediately they know that I'm not native. I've got a little Tori and a kind of foreigner's Korean accent.
Okay.
Probably speak a bit more simply, kind of like 어린이 한국말, because I spoke, my Korean was learned from speaking it at home, right?
Sure.
So while I look Korean and I speak the language, there's still, a bit of a line, you feel kind of detached from the native Koreans.
Okay.
It's not in a stressful way. It's more like, I'm a New Zealander. My nationality is New Zealand, but I'm not, afraid to say that a major part of me is being Korean as well.
Sure.
So you feel like you're kind of in both worlds. I don't feel like I'm being ripped apart by, opposing sides. I just feel like I can, hop between one or the other just comfortably and enjoy what comes with that.
Sure.
So being proud of being a New Zealander, talking about te reo and Māori, tikanga Māori culture comfortably, but at the same time understanding what makes Koreans tick, going out and having a soju, or, acting like a typical Korean, playing choku or something down at the hangang or having chimek, things like that I can do comfortably. And, I don't feel conflicted by that or any kind of identity crisis. I just feel I'm blessed by having two parts of me.
Nice, interesting. We kind of ask this to everyone, but if you could name 3 things that you love about Korea, what would those be?
Yeah, 3 things I love about Korea. I think the first thing that comes to mind about Korea is the people. I just think, the way I've been raised, although it was in New Zealand, it was my parents that raised me and they were, immigrants and maintained that Korean thinking and way of life. I just like the kind of the loyalty and uri that Koreans have. I'm big on loyalty. And Koreans have it in spades, whether it's to family or friends. And you can feel if you make a connection with someone, they'll remember you and they'll look out for you. I really like that. Number 2, oh gosh, probably the food. The food. When I moved to New Zealand, our family, there was no Korean grocery stores or Korean restaurant, hardly any Korean restaurants, if at all. You couldn't get the ingredients to make Korean food taste like proper, authentic Korean food. So we had to adapt. I think, my mum made kimchi using just regular cabbage. So it's changed now, but in those early years, I'm sure I was really young, but I pined for that taste of Korea.
Right.
And even now, it's different having Korean food in a other country. You have to, and Koreans are great at it, is you kind of adjust the taste to suit the kind of market that you're in.
Yeah.
So coming here and having the variety of Korean food and the quality is just, it makes me want to exercise more because I eat too much and gain weight. But I really like that, love that.
Amazing.
A third thing I like about Korea, I think familiarity. We're meant to be quite intrepid and adventurous as diplomats, and I am. I can go to a country and enjoy it. That's a big part of what I like doing. But it feels kind of like cheating in a good way, doing a posting in Korea because it feels so much like home.
Sure.
And home comforts are great, right? Understanding the culture, the language, and that. So the familiarity, I think I really like with Korea is the third thing I'll say. There's probably things I'll think of later and go, oh, why didn't I say that? But, no, that's the things that come to mind.
So in terms of New Zealand, what would you say are the 3 things that you love most about?
Yeah, gosh. So similar to my answer about Korea, I think the people, but in a different way. New Zealanders, generally, of course, you can't lump everyone in the same thing, are generally welcoming, self-effacing, kind of like relaxed, friendly people. But another thing that's quite big about New Zealand is really multicultural now. Like I said, when I first immigrated, there weren't many Asians. It was quite rare. But nowadays in New Zealand, it's such a multicultural country, and that's just become a part of New Zealand's identity and who we are. But I just like that. I like walking down the street and seeing a whole lot of different, kind of shops, restaurants, people, talking their own languages, but feeling happy to be in New Zealand and just feeling part of New Zealand and not. Look, so the second thing I miss is sports. Look, and Korea's sports mad as well. I'm sports mad, but it's a different kind of type of sport. Like in New Zealand, rugby. I just love the fact that in New Zealand you can go down to your local club, watch a club game, get a few friends together and play, touch rugby, a game of pickup touch rugby in the park. I think the third thing, what I do miss, New Zealand's obviously an island that's really coastal, so you don't have to travel far, and Wellington's, right at the bottom of the North Island as well. Okay. So being so close to the ocean is therapeutic and also a big part of who we are. Going for a swim in the ocean or going for a picnic at the beach or something like that. And while Seoul was lovely, and I love the mountains around here, and the Hangang has its charms as well. It's just different, going to the beach. And that's why when we go down to Busan, where my wife's family, most of her relatives are, I feel a bit an affinity with Busan as well, because it's beach style. Go down to the coast. You can just look out in the ocean, and it just kind of calms you. The sound of the ocean as well. So that's what I miss. Unfortunately, Seoul doesn't have that, but it has other benefits. So.
Sure. Right. Kind of moving forwards, what's your hope, your kind of dream for relationship between Korea and New Zealand?
I think the best relationships are the ones that are looking to constantly improve and evolve. While we start off in a good place, we'll start in a painful kind of place through the Korean War, kind of forged, what they say is that, relationships forged in kind of conflict are really strong. So the bonds are strong, but there's so much more that can be done. So you're always putting, kind of strands in your bow. You're looking for extra places. So currently, trade and economic is great, but there's so many other things that you can explore. Whether it's culture, I'm a big film buff. A whole world out there, and I guess our job is to kind of find out those new frontiers and kind of build on them, because it doesn't mean the other ones are then shunned. They're going well, so let's look for another one. And you're building this kind of, the structure that grows. It's built on a stable platform, so you've got more space to grow it, to grow it higher, to grow it wider. And so, feel a sense of responsibility, but quite also exciting as well, because what I want is a kind of deep connection between the two countries, and who knows where it could come from. And that's our job, is to find out and look for opportunities and take advantage of them.
I kind of just want to jump on a plane and go to New Zealand now.
Yeah.
Or
from here, you're in a good place to do it, compared to the UK.
Better than London.
Yeah, better than London. But looking forward to it. Yeah.
Thanks, dude.
Thanks very much.
Cool.
Yeah.
You're my faithful friend when I feel like I'm on my own.